and I think my boys would say that would be me being old.
Classic.
So, classic? Well,
Classic.
Classic.
Yeah, timeless.
Pause, awkward silence.
Mm-hmm.
So what about Cindy Holiday music? Do Cindy Holiday music?
Now, what would happen if it turned 6 and I just sit here for a while?
I'd like to know the legal question if we started 1 minute early, just for the sake of doing it.
We can't.
Start right at 6.
Right at 6.
Oh, there it
Oh, wait. No, I'm just going to sit here. No, I'm joking. Call the meeting to order. Those that care to, please stand for a prayer and pledge of allegiance. Mr. Canning, would you lead us in prayer?
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day and thank you for this community. And Lord, we just pray that you would lead and guide us in all that we do and say. We thank you for all the things that have taken place and continue to take place in our community. Lead and guide us tonight, and always say, in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good evening. Thank you very much for being here tonight. We have an agenda. We're going to work our way through it. I would like to start off tonight with the citizen participation. Now, what this is if you are a citizen wanting to speak about something that is not on the agenda, please approach the podium, give your name and your address, and you'll be given 3 minutes to say whatever it is that you need to say. Now, I will warn you, as these things come up, we don't always have answers right away. So if this is something that we need to look into, I might tell you that this is our plan to go forward on this issue. So if you're a citizen and want to speak, please approach the podium. Good evening.
Hello, good evening. My name is Audrey Meads, and I live at 441 North Kyle Avenue here in Republic.
Thank you for coming, Audrey.
Yes, thank you. And thank you all for everything that you do for our city. I really appreciate it. I've been a resident here for 18 years, and I'm coming to you today as a concerned mother, neighbor, and homeowner in regards to the detour plans released this afternoon by the City of Republic. In regards to the roundabout being built at Hines and Lynn intersection. I am personally in favor of the roundabout, and although I realize a detour will be required and a request to change a detour path may not be possible, my concern is specifically for the safety of residential streets, Logan and Kyle, that are directly affected by the detour set in place. As I said, my home sits on the corner of Logan and Kyle. I personally have 4 kids. One is a teen driver, and the other three are all under the age of 12. They love to play in my yard and ride their bikes with the other neighborhood kids. Tonight I'm not only speaking for myself, but I'm speaking for the residents of the other 14 homes that are affected within this small portion of the detour. These residents consist of at least 11 sick or elderly people, almost 20 children, and at least 14 drivers. There are more residents within the affected area that I've not come to know yet, but currently there's very low traffic at that intersection. So especially with it being summertime, it's going to have a grave effect on kids being in the area and all of that. And especially in relation to the thousands of people traveling the Hines and Lynn intersection daily right now, it's a huge concern. In the time I've been here, I've seen a lot of road work, and I've seen the damage and issues that our residential neighborhoods have had because of these detours without safety precautions being put in place ahead of time. So I'm here tonight to strongly encourage additional safety measures being implemented for all of the affected detour residents once the Hines Street and Lynn intersection is closed on May 30th. Safety measures to include temporary speed bumps in several areas, reduced speed and children at play signs installed, and a larger presence of police officers in the area to monitor the massive influx of traffic. I spoke to Mr. Angel with Republic Build's roadway department this afternoon, and he said that to his knowledge, there are currently no plans in the project plan to implement these safety measures for our residents being affected by the detour. So I would like to see that this safety concern is taken seriously and necessary precautions are set in place ahead of time, and for maybe future, roadway improvement. So that is all. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Audrey, thank you so much for coming forward and bringing this to our attention. I'm going to be honest with you, this is the first time I've encountered that issue before, so I don't know the answer, but I can tell you that we will be discussing it and seeing what we can do to address your concerns.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizens wishing to speak to something not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we will close citizen participation and we will move on to mayor's announcements. But I think Mr. Cameron's going to hijack my first mayor's
Sure.
announcement. So this is recognition of Sue Carter's National Award for working along the MM corridor. Mr. Cameron, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mrs. Carter, would you please come up here? I'm not going to ask you to speak. I'm doing this for you on her behalf tonight. But there was several months ago, as many of you know, the Andrew Nelson, Garrett Brickner, our team, actually came up with a plan for the MM corridor. It goes back to like 17, 18, or 19. Submitted that to MoDOT and came up with a plan to build a highway that would go around the fuel farm and basically through a lot of farmland. As you see that area developing today as you're going out of town by our gateway sign, there was a lot of land involved in that transaction. So there's a lot of commercial real estate. Sue Carter's been a icon in this community when it comes to the real estate community for quite some time. On the real estate, on the residential side, but this was a commercial transaction. And so it was very important to us as we were developing this corridor, as you can imagine, to make sure that property is secured for a commercial purpose. Because as we all know, if you go through 60 and you see all the things that have changed and evolved, it's very important when you're opening up new corridors that they're protected on a commercial capacity for what the cost of the infrastructure is. And Sue, working as a commercial, and Greg, I'm sorry. Greg, nice to meet you. First time. Greg O'Neill, working on this, on the property that was sold in that capacity, did an outstanding job of securing that land for Mr. Larry Lipscomb. I'm sure he won't mind if his name is being mentioned, but I'm going to bring it up. Mr. Lipscomb is also the man that donated our property for the building that we're occupying today in the capacity of this subdivision as well. But they submitted this program or this plan along this corridor as an award that included the high school or the school provisions, potential library, the future of potentially a city hall and other facilities, our sports recreational park out on that capacity. I believe it's out of 150 submittals or over 150 submittals and won that on a national level. And so tonight we are here to recognize their effort. And I just want to make sure because it's a big deal. I'm very proud of the work that has taken place out there to protect the interest of the community, but also to protect the interest of the economic development opportunities in that corridor. So I'm going to present the award. Mr. Mayor, if you would come down here so that we could take this picture, it'd be great. Which one will work best? I broke it.
Are you trying to get out of it? I don't think there's any escape in this one.
Congratulations. Sure you don't want to say it?
I would just like to say that Greg was instrumental, obviously, in securing the listings because of his relationships that he's got with farmers in the area. So it was his connections that actually secured the sale, and then my client did the acquisition. So just wanted to recognize him for that.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, moving along to mayor's announcement number 2. Do you have the certificates? Excellent. Jeremy, come on up. Yeah, I'm going to drag you up in front of people. You okay with that?
Whatever you need to do.
Excellent.
Whatever you need to do.
You know, Chris, I should have taken you up on the wall. All right, we'll do it this way. You know what?
What's that?
Public service, as it turns out, not always fun.
Right.
So when people step up and are willing to step into that void and help out the community, I have to say thank you.
Hey, you're welcome.
Jeremy Mathis has agreed to become a member of our Board of Adjustment. And this is it's a piece of work. I mean, you have to work at this. And this is not something you get a lot of recognition for, and I wanted to bring you up here to say thank you for volunteering to do this. You know, stepping into that role is something that not everybody does, and being able to do that is greatly appreciated. So, thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.
All right. Moving on to consent agenda. These are items number 3, 4, 5, and 6. I would consider, I would open the floor to any questions or comments on these issues from council. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda.
Motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to future meetings, we have a Board of Adjustments meeting on June 1st, 2023, City Council on June 6th and June 20th, and a Planning and Zoning meeting on June 12th, 2023. Moving on to old business and tabled items, item number 7 on our agenda. I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 23-14 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council vacating approximately 8,443 square feet of unoccupied utility easements at the 3000 block of East Sawyer Road, VACA 003.
Thank you, ma'am. Any updates from staff?
No.
Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I will now entertain a motion and a second for final passage of Bill 23-14.
Motion. Second.
We've got a motion and a second. We will take a roll call vote on our computers. Please click refresh. Cast your vote. Hit submit. And we will tally the votes. Ordinance passes 7-0. Moving on to item number 8 on our agenda, I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 23-15 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council vacating approximately 537 square feet of utility easement owned by Republic 63 LLC at the 3000 block of East Sawyer Road, VACA 004.
Thank you, ma'am. Any updates from the city?
No updates.
Any questions or discussion from council? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion and a second for final passage of 23-15, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We will now take a roll call vote on our computers. Please click refresh. Cast your vote. Hit submit. And we will tally the votes. Ordinance passes 7-0. Moving on to new business, this is item number 9 on our agenda. I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-16 by title only, please.
Motion. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council approving amendment of the zoning classification of approximately 1.28 acres of real property located at 1358 East US Highway 60 from Local Commercial District C1 and General Commercial District C2 to General Commercial District C2.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Tabor.
Good evening. Chris Tabor, Principal Planner. Staff has received an application to rezone the property at 1358 East US Highway 60. It's a property between Aldi's and Arby's. It's currently vacant. The property is also currently split zoned. So right now, as you can see, the zoning is currently, two different zonings, C1, local commercial, and general commercial C2. So tonight, the applicant is asking that the city go ahead and approve or consider the approval for the entirety of the property to be rezoned as general commercial. This rezone is considered consistent with the city's adopted plan and with the trend of development in the area. Both water and wastewater services have the capacity to serve this site. Access to the site is going to be off the North Republic Commons Drive. No access will be given off of US Highway 60. A traffic impact study was not required in this case as a large portion of the site's already zoned for commercial C2. Staff is recommending approval of this rezone application.
Thank you, sir. Questions from council? We'll start down here, Mr. Self.
Chris, could you explain to the people out there why somebody would want C2 as opposed to C1?
So the difference between the two zoning districts, C1 and C2, in this case, C1 is our less intensive retail-focused zoning district, while C2 allows for more intensive uses. So a large area, we have a large swaths of US 60 that are zoned C2. It is our most, one of our most appropriate places for those more intense commercial uses.
Thank you.
Mr. Gerke.
Still mine.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Frankel.
And again, just for explanation purposes, the original zoning in the red that just kind of cuts diagonal through the property, was that, I think I heard in the planning and zoning meeting that was it was just originally adopted that way?
I would have to do some research to be sure, but my assumption would be that the original zoning map came down when they laid it out all over the properties, and as roads and properties developed, these did not line up with property lines. It happens all over the city, so we end up correcting these cases in a lot of different areas.
Sure. It's just an interesting scenario, but thank you.
We've got some triple zone ones too.
Nice. Diverse.
Other questions? Did any citizens show up to talk at the zoning meeting?
We did not have anyone show up either in support or against.
How did the planning and zoning commissioners feel about this? Is this an appropriate use of the moving to the C2?
We had, the commission voted in favor unanimously, 4-0.
Were there any concerns discussed there?
There were no concerns discussed.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, please remember this is a first read, so if you have any questions, get with staff before the next meeting. We will move on to, my attorney's pointing at something. Did I miss something?
Sorry, I was pointing for myself.
Okay, very good. Just making sure.
Carry on.
Moving on to item number 10 on our agenda. This is a resolution. This is 23-R-30, a resolution of the City Council approving a preliminary plat for Greenfield Estates, a residential subdivision consisting of approximately 23.48 acres located near 7628 West Farm Road 174 in Republic, Missouri. I need a motion and a second to take up resolution 23-R-30.
Motion. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Tabor?
Hello again. Enterprise Development LLC has submitted an application for the preliminary plat of Greenfield Estates. The property was a subject of a previous preliminary plat that has now expired. That occurred around September of 2020, that approval. The project is under new ownership, and so they've had to come back after the expiration, and their intention would be to pursue infrastructure development. The subdivision is zoned high-density single-family R1H with 80 lots and 7,000, all the lots being 7,000 square feet or greater, with an average lot size of about 7,700 square feet. The max density for this zoning district is 6.22 lots per acre. As you can see on the plat, there's two new connections to city streets. So the first is at Bailey and Farm Road 174. That most eastern street will be a continuation of Bailey, and so that'll be a city connection at Bailey and 174, and then a city connection at Timber Oak Street through Wilson's Creek Villas to the west there. And then we'll also have a connection into the county as part of Bailey. So this will also make that connection into Rankin Acres to the south, which is a county-owned right-of-way street. So as regards water, there will be a loop from a 10-inch main to the north to an 8-inch main on the west, and the site is in proximity to an 8-inch sewer main, also to the west. The subject parcel contains no identified sinkholes and no special flood hazard area. Stormwater from the site will utilize the existing detention on the south there. This was built to serve both Wilson's Creek Villas and the development of the Greenfield property. So that has already been built, and that will be utilized for that, and it was designed to serve all of those lots. The design of streets, sidewalks, water and sanitary sewer system, and stormwater detention will be reviewed and permitted as part of the infrastructure permitting process. Staff considers the proposed plat in general conformity with the requirements for preliminary plats and is recommending approval of this application.
Thank you, sir. Questions from council? Mr. Gerke.
So what was it zoned before? Is it the similar project? You kind of touched base on that, but how was it?
The previous project was also R1H. It looked exactly like this with a smaller detention and 2 lots on the east of that detention. So it had 82 lots. The detention was enlarged to serve the adjacent development, Wilson's Creek Villas. And so that took up 2 lots. So what you're seeing is essentially the same, just a little bit less lots.
Bigger. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Mr. Franco.
Mr. Mayor, in the planning and zoning video, they talked about the county and the city working together on some of that stormwater runoff. Is that what occurred, was just the widening of that detention basin?
So we do consult the county whenever they'll be impacted by stormwater coming from a property into the county, and especially when we're doing any development. So we did consult with Greene County and worked with some of their engineers during the design of this, and they did have input and comments on this project.
But the detention basin itself is larger than the previous development that was there. Was that something that was changed? You said as per
There was some back and forth between the county and the developers as the private side was looking to add that second subdivision to serve also into the detention. So, initially that preliminary plat went through with a smaller detention, and somewhere in the middle of that, infrastructure planning phase, the county got involved, and there was some private, cooperation to enlarge that.
Gotcha. I'm following you now. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How long has this, by one developer or another, been a project that is trying to get done?
So the original preliminary plat passed in 2020, in September of 2020. The original owner began installing infrastructure and then for one reason or another abandoned the project. Sure. So we've got someone who has come in and taken interest in, going to kind of resurrect that same project now.
So between developer number 1 and developer number 2 in the span of 3.5 years or so, to your knowledge, has any citizen, say the ones that back up against it on Wade or any of these houses here that back up to that, has anybody stepped out and said, we don't want this here?
We haven't had any citizens come forth at any of the meetings for the preliminary platting of the project.
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, seeing none, and as this is a resolution, we can call it immediately for a vote, which is what I will do. All those in favor of 23-R-30, please vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Resolution passes 6-1. Moving on to number 11 on our agenda, this is 23-R-31, a resolution of the City Council authorizing disposal of approximately 0.3 acres of city-owned real estate located at 325 West Mill Street and authorizing the city administrator to execute the necessary documents to effect sale of the property to the highest bidder, Danny Lambert. I need a motion and a second to take up resolution 23-R-31, please.
Motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. Now, who's going to cover this for the city?
I will.
Good. Thank
Excellent.
you, Laura. Say, I will.
Earlier this year, council gave us authorization to proceed with the notice for bid for the sale of the residential property on West Mill Street. That was published in March. We received 4 bids. The highest bidder was Danny Lambert at $27,005. Staff is recommending approval so we can move forward with closing.
Thank you, ma'am. Questions from council? Seeing none, as this is a resolution, we can call it immediately for a vote, which is what I will do. All those in favor of 23-R-31, please vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution passes 7-0. Moving on to item number 12 on our agenda, this is 23-R-32, a resolution of the City Council authorizing the city's purchase of approximately 9.9 acres and authorizing the city administrator to execute the real estate sale agreement and other necessary documents to complete such a purchase. I need a motion and a second to take up Resolution 23-R-32.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are you ready for this?
Dwayne Compton. I'm proud to say I'm a fire chief for the City Republic, Mayor.
Glad to have you here, sir.
And hi to my parents who are watching. So they're not David's not the only one. So, okay, we started this project exactly 1 year ago today. We met in executive session. The council gave me authorization to get the appraisal done on this property. We got that done. We presented it to the owner, Mr. Cantwell. He was having some health issues at that time. Unfortunately, he passed away after the first of this year. He left instructions with his family to, if all possible, sell the land to the city. It ended up in probate court for a short amount of time. The property is now cleared probate court, and the family is ready to dispose of it. This is located, as you can see on the map, directly south of the new Builds facility and directly east of a high school. This location was chosen based upon response time in that geographical area. We are at our limit where we need to be, so we need to be a little bit quicker with all the new housing and apartments that are coming to that particular area. We had 2 assessment plans done for fire station placement. One of them was done through the Insurance Service Organization, ISO, which rates the city, and then the other one was done with Mr. Tabor and Mr. Jones, Josh Jones's help. And both of them were separate of each other, and they come up with the identical bullseye where we needed to be. So we would now like to move forward with the purchase of the property. It is 9.9 acres roughly. The price of the property, the appraised amount is $469,000. There's approximately $1,613.16 in closing cost. Ready to go forward. Any questions?
Mr. Updike.
Will this include a training center, like I previously mentioned?
Yes, so where we'd like to be long-term, and in the last city council workshop, that was one of the unfunded things that we're gonna have to work on. The first thing is to get this secured. Then we'll have to abate the well and some other stuff, tear the house down and see how things will set on the property once we get it. Where we need to be long-term is a joint police fire training facility. So this will become our new headquarters. The police department needs a larger training facility long-term than what they have now. And so do we. We need to get all of our props on one piece of property. We're currently doing live burns this week at Fire Station 2, and this will probably be the last time we do this because the smoke off our burn prop is blowing over onto iron grain. Now, if we catch it, the wind's blowing a different way, that's great, but it's not very neighborly of us to do that. Of course, it's not occupied right now. So long-term, we need to be here. As you're aware of this, as what we talked previously, this does have a floodplain, which works to our advantage because it is a buffer. We won't have anybody up next to us.
Other questions from council?
Mr. Mayor.
Sir.
I just had a curiosity. What was our source of funding for the purchase of this?
So
land?
I was going to mention that, and thank you for bringing that up. We will take this out of the fire sales tax account. It will require a budget adjustment because there was, at the first, well, actually in November when we set the budget in December, we didn't really know where we're going to be at. We knew we were going to have it. We do have ample funds to pay for this. And as you're aware of, Mr. Franklin, what we don't spend in that account rolls back into a reserve savings account so that we can get out of it when needed.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Seeing none, as this is a resolution, we can call it immediately for a vote, which is what I will do. All those in favor of 23-R-32, please vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution passes 7-0. Moving on to finance reports. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Bob Ford, Finance Director for 84 days.
And we are glad to have you as well, sir.
And I keep coming back.
That's right.
We will, we'll start out with a little discussion around sales tax and where sales taxes are going with regards to where we are from a monthly perspective as well as a year-to-date perspective. I know there's been some discussion. David has sent a couple of emails letting you know that sales taxes, where they are, what's going on. But if you look at this first chart, this is the month of May that we're in right now. We get our sales tax information early in the month, so we're able to report this quite early. And this is a comparison on the chart of looking at May 20 of 23 to the same period in 2022. So we're up 5.18% over the actuals of 22. It's important to note, however, that from a budget perspective, what's been budgeted for 23, we're still under budget a little bit. We're about 50 grand under budget. Now, what's driving the May 23 numbers in terms of the comparison to 22 is that there's a couple of things going on in 22. So first of all, in the first quarter of 22, the public safety sales tax skews those numbers a little bit. The public safety sales tax was coming online and starting to ramp up. So May of 2022, the revenue from a tax perspective for the public safety sales tax was about $245,000, whereas for the rest of 2022, the average per month was about $275,000 per month. So you see there was a growth period in the second half of 2022 versus the first half of 2022. So when you compare 23 to a period in 22 that was ramping up, you're going to get an improvement over what we saw actually happen in 22. Probably the more important thing to consider is where are we year to date? May numbers are interesting from the perspective that it gives us a snapshot in time, but if we look at May 2023 year-to-date activity, this chart is doing a couple of things. One, it's comparing where we are with regards to year-to-date information in 22. It's comparing where we are year-to-date in 23 on an actuals basis, and then it's also comparing where are we from a year-to-date perspective on a budget. So if you look at the gray bar, let's look at the totals. If you look at the totals, the gray bar is showing as compared to actuals, which is the blue bar, that we're actually $457,000 behind our budgeted objective with regards to the consolidated sales tax numbers in 23. Once again, in our analysis, the little box at the top of the page where we talk about we're up just slightly over actuals of 22, we excluded the public safety data from that analysis so that we wouldn't skew the numbers. But once again, if you look at where we are from a budget perspective, we're about 8% behind budget at this point, year to date. So I think we'll talk a bit more about this in a minute or two as we go through risk and opportunities. But one of the things that I think as you step back and you think about sales tax numbers, and granted, 84 days in the process, I don't have the answers. However, I will say that you would think that in an inflationary environment, as prices go up, you would think that taxes would follow suit. So if they're not following suit, then there's something going on. One, either that we're selling less units at the current pricing structure, or there's some process situation that's going on at the state where they're slow in delivering sales tax to us as compared to 22 or compared to how we budgeted the numbers. So once again, we continue to watch this to see if it's a process issue. But one of the things that, I listen to Bloomberg driving to and from the office, and one of the things I've been hearing for the last 5 or 6 or 7 weeks is that there's this sort of rolling recession going on, and this rolling recession being certain industries are in a recession today where other industries are not. So those that are in the goods industry, so Walmart, Lowe's, et cetera, those sort of goods, purveyor of goods, those types of businesses have been in a recession for a while. At least if you listen to Bloomberg and their commentators, that's what they're saying. Whereas on the services side, people are buying plane tickets and they're going to restaurants and they're doing lots of things on the services side. But on the good side, we're seeing a slowdown in activity. So it could be an economic issue. We could be dealing with an economic slowdown on the good side, and that's what we're seeing happening on the sales tax front. So we will continue to watch it. Obviously it's concerning to us from a perspective of understanding where we're going to see sales taxes for the remaining part of the year. There is some good news that we'll talk about in a little while, but I just wanted to make sure that we sort of set the stage from a sales tax perspective, both for the month of May and also year to date. If you think about where we are from a cash perspective, so instead of giving you the detailed cash chart that we show by fund and by department, I just wanted to give you the highlights. We've got, at the end of March, and this is true today, we've got about $67 million in total cash. So if you think about that total cash pool, 13.3 million is currently unrestricted. So almost 20% of that balance is unrestricted. And that's broken out. A little over half of those unrestricted funds live in the general fund, and the remaining live in all the other funds and over the departments. There's about $4 million of designated funds that have been either designated by the council or designated by the city, and those designations could be redesignated should the need arise. But the significant portion of our cash is tied to the 2 bond offerings. Almost $50 million are restricted. That's about 75%. About $40 million tied to the wastewater project, and about $9.9 million tied to the pool expansion. So from a cash perspective, this gives you a snapshot of where we were on March 31, and I checked the numbers tonight, and we're almost exactly in the same place tonight. This report is tying the fund balances where we were at the beginning of the year, total revenues minus expenses, and where the fund balances are at this point in time. I will make a comment that the city is a cash basis budgeter. And so the way we budget everything that comes in the door is considered revenue. Everything that goes out the door is considered expense. In fact, we know that some of the things coming in the door is not in fact revenue, that it is, for instance, a bond issuance. $9.9 million of cash came in the front door. It's currently reflected, if you look at line 2, Parks and Recreation, it shows that total revenues year to date through the end of March was $11.3 million. We know that's not correct. But the way we've historically captured revenues and expenses, we've always waited to the end of the year. The auditors go back through, they pull those things out of the income statement that really belong on the balance sheet. They do a journal entry to adjust for that. And so our balance sheet is correct one day a year. We're making a change. That process is going to change, and we will, in the finance department, begin to capture those things that should be sitting on the balance sheet as opposed to sitting on the income statement. So in this case, for instance, there's $9.9 million that was captured as revenue that would actually been captured as a liability. That's where it belongs. It's dead on our balance sheet. So there's some changes that are coming down the pike that we plan on putting in place so that we capture this information more appropriately so that our balance sheet is true at any point during the year, as well as the income statement. I want to kind of tie back to the risks and opportunities that we see from a budget versus actual perspective. And if you, once again, obviously city sales taxes are the biggest unknown, the biggest risk that we're currently facing. And we will continue to monitor and kind of peel that that information apart so that we understand what's really driving this change, or not change, but why are we seeing a flat revenue stream from a sales tax perspective in fiscal '23? I wouldn't call this a risk, but I would call this a situation where we've got sort of a negative impact to the budget, and there's some things that were unbudgeted in '23 that have come to fruition. For instance, the $9.9 million of Series 23 bond debt that is supporting the pool expansion. We didn't budget for the debt service in this year. So there's $265,000 that we will update in our forecast that will have a negative implication on the cash flows for this year. But the flip side, there are some opportunities. And the one that it's always nice when you come into an organization and you find out that interest income that we have forecasted was forecasted at 70 basis points, and we're actually receiving 275 basis points today. January 1, Arbus Bank made a change and changed the interest rate that we earn on all of our cash that's invested in the bank. They changed the rate from historically at 70 basis points to 275 basis points, which is part of our contract with Arbus that they would pay a competitive and market-based rate. That 275 basis points, if I take what was forecast from a cash perspective in the budget and just apply the new interest rate, it equals $1 million. So we have a $1 million or greater opportunity on an actual basis this year, just from an interest perspective. Now, recognize 75% of that cash balance is what? It's restricted. And so that revenue, that income, is going to sit in those restricted accounts. But that still leaves $250,000 to $300,000 of unrestricted revenue that will end up in the various funds where the cash currently sits. So it's kind of nice to walk into an organization and find out, oh, it didn't go the other way. You didn't overestimate what you were going to see from an interest revenue perspective. There's also the spend rate, which is going to help us a bit. We're spending that cash a little slower than we expected. So it's going to sit in our bank. It's going to earn 275 basis points. And so there's some de minimis incremental revenue that we'll see from that perspective. And Arbus will reset that rate on July 1. Since January 1, we've seen what? We've seen 2 25 basis point increases by the Fed. So our expectation is we're going to see at least a 275 basis point interest rate reset for the remaining part of the year, probably higher. You've seen this report in the administrative package that comes out every month. The only thing I will point at, and the importance here is to give you an idea that we're showing you actual revenue through the end of March, or actual expense through the end of March. And then the comparison, the percentage, is comparing those revenues or expenses to the budget for the year revenue or expenses. So let's just look at the top box. Top box is the general fund, and you'll notice that from a revenue perspective, we're currently sitting at about 30% of the budget target for the year. Whereas on the expenditure side, we're sitting at about 22%. Now, one of the things I didn't mention on the prior page is that one of the additional good guys that we have from an expense perspective is that we've had a number of jobs that are posted and that we're actively seeking to replace those jobs. However, we budgeted for them. There's no one in that job today drawing a salary. Primarily police and fire, but also some in the administrative organization. So if you look at those components, year to date, there's about $400,000 of expense that we haven't spent, that's been budgeted, that even if we hired the people tomorrow, we get to keep that $400,000. And we'll continue to look for those folks, and the expectation is we will continue to see some incremental expense savings until all those jobs are filled. But the importance, why did I say that? I wanted to point to that 22% of the expenses for the general fund is representative of the fact that we've got a number of jobs that are open and we haven't filled them. And so as a result, you would expect that expenses as a percent of the budget target would be lower than where we are on the revenue side. From a debt summary perspective, I wanted to spend just a little time talking about where we are from an absolute debt perspective and what our debt service looks like. So I'm sure you've seen this report before, but if you look at December 31, 2022, we ended the year with $52 million in debt outstanding. And over the year, we issued the $9.9 million of the Series 23 debt, which is going to fund the pool expansion, and there's some additional debt funding coming from the MM5-lane expansion also. So then the next column I provided is the principal pay down during the year. So this is not total debt service, this is just the principal pay down, so that we can look at beginning balance plus any new issuance, less any principal pay down to get to our ending balance as projected for 12/31/23. And if you look at that, we're going to be sitting at almost $62 million in debt outstanding. The importance there is just to understand the magnitude of what's currently on the plate. From a debt service perspective in fiscal 23, we've got both principal and interest to pay, and our total payment that's obligated for the year is about $4.6 million. So if you compare that to where we were a couple of years ago, that's a pretty significant increase when it comes to our commitment on an annual basis from a debt service perspective. And then last but not least, this is a schedule just to kind of calibrate you as to what does our debt service look like over the next 20 years. And you'll notice the totals are on the left-hand side, a little hard to read, but you'll notice that next year's our big year, our highest year in terms of debt service, and then it will start to gradually start to pay down over time. But a pretty significant obligation over the next 10 years, and then we start to see a pretty significant pay down in the outstanding debt. So in general, I think if you think about the risks and opportunities, sales taxes are a bit of a concern. We've got some good guys also at the same time. Interest income, we've got a good guys on the savings we've got from employee and employee benefits. So if you add up all of those components, it's about a wash. Even if we ended the year and remained flat on a sales tax revenue perspective. So the good news is there are gives and takes so that if sales tax doesn't come back and it remains at flat and it compares to last year's number, we're still going to be in about the same position at the end of the year as we are in terms of how we budgeted fiscal 23. It was a lot of information. Questions?
Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. I can't talk without my hands. My wife said if I tied your hands behind your back, you would be
You're
mute.
good.
Yeah.
You're good.
So I do have a question. The sales tax revenue.
Yes.
I know you're 84 days in. In my experience in the past, we have seen 1 month go way up, another month go way down, almost like we get a month and a half all at
Yep.
once, and then we get a half a month the next month.
Yep.
Are we trying to predict that? Do you think that might be playing into this, or do we have any idea?
I don't think we have any idea. That's why I don't think monthly information means a whole lot because of those great swings from 1 month to the next. As we see the year progress, year-to-date information will become more and more important. It'll help to smooth out the average over time. So as of right now, we've got 5 months of data. And 5 months of data, it says we're behind from a budget perspective, and we're trending to about where we were last year.
Yes, sir.
So, Your comparison, you're saying the good stuff, the bad stuff, the things that we have working for us. One of them is that we've got unfilled positions, but there's a reason that they're positions in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
Are we thinking like hiring freeze? I mean, is this the steps that we're taking here?
That is not the objective.
Sure.
It's just trying to explain, hey, we're moving down the road to hire for these jobs.
Yeah.
But the good news in the short term is that we've got some expense
We've
savings.
saved some money.
It's a byproduct
Yeah.
of the process.
So we're not counting on that.
We're not
for
counting
your
on that
bottom
going
line.
forward. That is
Yeah.
correct.
Yes, sir.
I can follow up afterwards to a more specific question, but you talk about the debt service on there in 2022, I believe. We had a significant debt reduction service. We had, obligations that were paid off. Correct?
Yes.
Some, yes.
Yeah, 'cause I think it's important to note that it's increased, but it seems more drastic. We had several obligations that were paid off that we required to be paid off before we took on new debt. So that's
Correct.
Yep. Yep. 'Cause I think it'd be good just to show, and again, maybe outside of it, of historical debt to now, because I think it looks like a bigger gap than what it is, because we had significant debt that we serviced for, 10 or 15 years that was extinguished.
That is correct.
Yep. Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Sir.
So, Bob, I think you've done a fantastic job of explaining it. The one thing about it is the anomaly, and Representative Davison, it's great to see you here tonight. The anomaly with the Department of Revenue, when it comes into those, since I've been here historically, you'll see, like, as you well elaborated, you may see a 30% increase one month and you're celebrating when we're 30% up, and it's flat the next. The one anomaly in 2022 is early in the first quarter, we received like a $250,000 makeup payment. So it's, as we're saying, it's not a procedural issue inside for us. It's when we receive them from the state. And so there's no consistent trend, in at least my 7 years, that could show you that you're going to see plus or minus a margin of 3%. It has historically looked like a roller coaster. Historically, though, towards the end of the year, it's like it gets figured out, but it's like there's a lot of work at the beginning of the year, the first quarter. If you took that number out of 2023, the infusion that we got in 2022, we're 10% up over last year. So it's like it's hard to budget or make allocations. So in a lot of ways, we don't consider like hiring freezes, because historically in the city, as it is with everywhere, police and fire positions or any positions, you budget for them as though you got to cover, but rarely do they ever cover the whole year, because I think probably in all the last 6 years there's been a deficit, not a deficit, but a surplus in those departments. And to clarify one point that was made on the general fund, a portion of that fund balance is in the public safety side. So when you're looking at that from the public safety folks, part of that is not actually in general fund that can be reallocated. It can only be used in the fire and police sides.
Right.
Other questions? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Moving on to reports from staff. Mr. Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as it was mentioned tonight, Oakwood and Hines, the intersection, this is a project that was in 2017 capital improvement sales tax that talked about improvements to Hines Street. It also includes a sidewalk on that project, and we're also evaluating the Hines and ZZ intersection as well. But that will start May 30th. It was set up for May 30th. The school would be out. And so the fact that school is closing and they have until the summer to get it completed is the purpose of that. I do appreciate the comment from the resident that showed up tonight. I'm sure Mr. Brickner and Ms. Haynes are talking about that with the resident. I appreciate that, but I also remember when we did Oakwood and Hines, I remember when we set up speed bumps to those neighborhoods, I think we had 2 to 1 people complaining about the speed bumps. But at the same time, if you live along that corridor, it's understandable that you would want something done, especially when there's not that many people and you have small children going through there. Representative Davison, I'm glad you're actually here tonight, because I was going to mention tonight that at least in principle, I heard from Senator Trent today that the $25 million that we requested in this year's state budget has at least been included in the budget, and it is included. It is on the governor's desk for signature. And Representative Davison, we worked very closely with him throughout this process. We continue to work closely with him because we're not finished in the efforts, and he's been very helpful in the process, as was Senator Huff, Cody, Dirk, all the representatives on the state, both the House and the state side. Again, it's still subject to the governor's signature, but it is encouraging to see another $25 million in there for the City of Republic, specifically related to the sewer improvements that are needed in our community that go all the way back to 2011. But I do appreciate the work of Representative Davison, because we've leaned on his wisdom and discussions when we're in the Capitol. And I know that we did that when we were back there in January and February. I'm sure you're looking forward to a break.
We'll talk about it
in July, we are going to reconvene and actually have a discussion of the current state of where we're at versus where the next phase is. And I'm looking forward to that discussion, as much as it's been a painful discussion to have just in general to navigate the city through an administrative order with DNR. I do appreciate the work of all those representatives, but again, it's still subject to the governor's signature. I don't want to count our chickens before they hatch, but at the same time, looking forward to seeing that happen sometime in June, hopefully. So, also, Governor Parson, it was great. He was in town last week and had a chance. It's fortuitous to have him tour the Convoy of Hope site, so we got a chance to visit. And so if we are going to be hosting events where we're going to be taking people through the Convoy of Hope site. It's a 200,000 square foot facility. I know there's been a lot of talk about Amazon lately, but the majority of that is with what Convoy has built out there. And they are very excited about us participating with them in just the overall discussion. And they've also offered tours of the facility for the city, because I think a lot of times the Convoy of Hope site was looking at alternative locations other than just Southwest Missouri. And so they're very appreciative of being in Republic and the work that we have done. I know the dedication is on October 5th, and so everyone from the city will be invited. I know the city council and the mayor should have, if not already, received that invite. I know they're going to have their soft opening. Staff will be reporting to that campus in the middle of August. So I want to commend the city staff for the work that you all have done to help facilitate that development. I know that in the discussion with the governor, Convoy of Hope mentioned it several times, how much the city had participated and how easy it was to deal with, and so I appreciated his comments. But again, we've had a great relationship with him in our discussions at the Capitol as well, and so he is, again, I'll hold our breath till the June signature on the budget, but also if we get a chance, we'll be out at Convoy. In tonight's packet, in the admin report, there is a report that I'll ask Councilmember Updike if he would like to speak to at the end of my comments. But I would encourage you this goes way back to the work sessions we had with the mayor and council and the staff, where we were talking about how to engage the mayor and council in additional conversations, how to get ideas and suggestions on there. Since that time, Councilmember Updike has submitted a report, a sustainability initiative for the council's review and consideration. It is included as an attachment, and at the end of my comments, I'll provide the floor. Mayor can provide the floor for him to comment on what that looks like. But again, Councilmember Updike, I appreciate you taking the time to submit your ideas for your peers to review and for us as a staff to look at. I appreciate the insight. Other than just as staff, we can get focused on infrastructure and the development and doing different things. So having someone else take a different look at it and submit it and allow your peers to review it at this body and have further discussion, I appreciate. But again, I'll offer that at the very end. To those on the Leadership Advisory Board, would you just raise your hand if you're here? They're out here doing homework assignments tonight. So this at the beginning of this year, yep, yeah, you're here. You're not doing homework tonight. So at the beginning of the year, we created a Leadership Advisory Board. This is part of our Moving Forward, Turning Inward initiative, where we actually created another group of up-and-coming leaders that want to learn and grow more in the administration and just how the city is operating. And so I appreciate you being here tonight. I'm sure that there's a lot more to learn, but I appreciate we've talked about the charter, we've talked about the financial position of the city, we talked about priorities, and also they are working on a Main Street initiative, a meeting on a weekly basis, and then asking me a ton of questions about what we're doing and how it works. And so I appreciate you all being here tonight for that discussion. I got a lot to say tonight. The premier site, so the Garrett Industrial Park on MM Highway, Sue Carter was here tonight to receive her award. Going further north down MM Highway. Many may not know that we were working actively with the state of Missouri. After the Amazon site was fulfilled, we have one more property that is being developed right behind it, looking for the next parcel for where we're going to build a 400-acre, I guess you'd call it a premier site. So we actually had property owners, or legacy owners that I would consider. So we went out and met with those folks and offered to work with them on designating their property adjacent to I-44 and MM. So if you know the Garrett Industrial Property, or Garrett Property, which is where they used to have all the exotic animals when I was growing up as a kid, working with that family, their brothers, their father wanted to make that into more of a commercial industrial property whenever he had that. There's also a property adjacent to rail. So to go through getting that property listed as a premier site in the state of Missouri is no easy task, which means I believe there's only one of 10, which means once it's listed as a premier site, it's listed not only in a statewide issue, it's listed on a nationwide level. And so I know Representative Davison participated on it. Karen did a fantastic job. We met with the legacy, the families, and talked to them, but our staff did a fantastic job of working with the state to get the property listed as the premier site. So it's one of 10 with access to rail. And so there have been non-disclosure agreements on that property, of which we have not been, not to all the properties, of which we're not signatory to. So we've been asked about all the non-disclosure agreements. After the last several we've done, most are not sending them to us anymore. And so that's fine with us. And so it keeps it a little bit where they're working with the property owners and working with the infrastructure owners. But I want to commend the staff, because this is a major accomplishment for us to get that site listing. And so now it's if we can just continue to work with the state, and we will continue to work with the state to get the infrastructure and the funding to support that. And Representative Davison, I'm not really sure if I'd even told you that had been designated, because that hadn't been established last time we was at the Capitol, but that has been completed. So, and then last but not least, I think I've got it all except one piece. Kurt Cook, we met, about a year ago? Has it been about a year ago? Raise your hand, Kurt. Yeah. So Kurt, he does a lot of, he'll be really shy about it, but he does a lot of film work. He did a lot of the commercials you see for Bass Pro and other agencies. He's behind the camera and creates those videos. And so he's also a resident of Republic and participates in the chamber, participates throughout the region. I see him in a number of places. And so we began to discuss, like, what would it look like as a resident and a patron of our community? What would it look like to create a video for us? And so Jennifer Mayfield, Jared Keeling did a fantastic job of working with Kurt, and as with all of our other staff, to create this. There's a whole lot of members, but tonight, prior to yielding the floor, this will be the first time we've unveiled this. So if you would go ahead and just roll that video. That is not the video. If that's the video, Chief would love that to be the video.
Republic, Missouri. It's a small town with a big vision. To be a regional leader in everything it takes for a community to prosper. It is homecoming. From its earliest days and through the years, Republic has been a place for people to grow, connect, and flourish. Today, robust transportation connections through highway, rail, and air, and record public and private investment in infrastructure place Republic at the center of opportunity and growth. With land prime for development, an unprecedented expansion and investment in housing, a thriving business community, a growing workforce, and a can-do attitude toward building the city's future. Republic is a community connected, where compassion is displayed every day, where next-level parks and trails provide superior recreational opportunities, where Tiger Pride shines throughout our award-winning public schools, where higher education and job training opportunities are close to home, and Your connections are built through memorable experiences and events. Even as it grows, Republic is a community where anyone can flourish. A great place to grow your business. A great place to get involved. A community committed to public safety, to the future of our park system, and to advancing our schools. With unique local shopping and dining options, and regional sports, cultural, tourist, and historical attractions all within reach. Republic is the perfect place to call home. Come grow, come connect, come flourish in Republic.
Kurt, that was a great job.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Did you want Mr. Updike?
Oh, yes, Mr. Updike, you have the floor.
This initiative first started when we went to do the conference in Lake of the Ozarks last year that me and Mr. Franklin attended. Then the city of Brentwood gave the presentation for how they use their resources. Then I started going, what could our neighborhood do? What could our city do? Then after more researching, because there are several projects and I didn't put into the initiative that we can also look at. But it was just for almost a year now. It's just something I just worked on and researched and had the nerve to bring up to you guys to see and for anyone to see now. Then if anybody wants to talk about it or discuss about it, they're more than happy to email me.
Excellent. Well, thank you for submitting it. I know that I'm going to be reviewing it. I know the rest of us will, and we look forward to seeing how we can move forward with it. So thank you.
No problem.
Anything else from you, sir?
That is all.
Excellent. I will open it up for reports from council. Mr. Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think everyone has already left, but congratulations to Sue Carter, and thank you to Jeremy Mathis. I love seeing the community involvement, and so seeing an award and also seeing the involvement, whether it's the Board of Adjustment, Planning and Zoning, City Council, I love to see that. So I appreciate having that as a part of our meeting and appreciate those individuals for coming and being a part of that. And I also appreciate the citizens, Miss Maids, that came up and gave us more perspective on her neighborhood and how the roundabout is going to affect her. It kind of gave me a better perspective on some things that, you can always try to think of everything, but you can't always think of everything. So I appreciate her coming up here and talking to us on council. Other than that, the only other thing I wanted to mention was I wanted to say thank you for the sign that's over on Oakwood and Hines that's letting people know about that roundabout coming in. I saw that on my way here, and thank you. That lets a lot of people know that aren't going to be getting a phone call on May the 30th wanting to know what's going on. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Anything else from council? We'll see none. I will give my report, and it's really easy to get caught up in Bob's numbers up there. They're really big numbers, and it is really understandable to hear from the citizens talking about a roundabout and how frustrating that's going to be. I understand, but I'm going to tell a different story. I got an email from a lady that had a car parked in front of her home, and it had been there for weeks, and it hadn't been moved, and she was mad. And you know something? That would irritate me to no end myself, and I totally understand it. I'm glad that she reached out to me because I was able to get with Karen. Karen was able to get on the ball, and we were able to get that car moved within hours of her email. And as I hear about these big things, I also remember that we're doing little things that are incredibly big in people's lives. And I want to thank you for allowing me to be up here to do that. I want to thank the staff for assisting me. I had an email that I forwarded to Jared about a citizen very upset about the prices of our aquatic center. So we looked into it, and she was just upset. And once we talked to her and explained why we did it, things calmed back down. I just don't think she still thinks it, I believe she still thinks it's too high, but she at least understands our point of view, and we can explain that and have a conversation about that. And the staff being on the ball, responding to things right away, is what allows us up here to be able to address our citizens. So thank you for doing that and allowing us to do our jobs. And with that, unfortunately, we do have executive session tonight. So no further action other than announcing adjournment by the mayor shall take place after an executive session that is scheduled as the last matter on the agenda unless otherwise stated on the agenda or as allowed per RSMO 610.02. Would you quit pointing? You keep making me think I'm missing something. All right, she's saying it matches. Item number 1, RSMO 610.021.1, pending and/or potential litigation, closed session, closed vote, closed record. Number 2, RSMO 610.021.12, any document related to a negotiated contract until a contract is executed, closed session, closed vote, closed record. Item number 3, RSMO 610.021.3, hiring, firing, promotion, or disciplining personnel, closed session, closed vote, closed record. And finally, item number 4, RSMO 610.021.13, individually identifiable personnel records, performance ratings, or records pertaining to employees, closed session, closed vote, closed record. Did I get everything?
You did.
Excellent. Perfect. I would entertain a motion and a second to adjourn into executive session.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote by voice, please.
Councilmember Wilson.
Aye.
Councilmember Updike.
Aye.
Councilmember Gerlich.
Aye.
Councilmember Self.
Aye.
Councilmember Franklin.
Aye.
Councilmember Gerke.
Aye.
Councilmember Poole.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Excellent. We are adjourned into executive session. We will